Welcome back to React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by randomhouseguest.com. It's like chat roulette, but for guests. Episode 314, announcing Expo Workflows with Jon Samp.
Hey everyone, I'm Mazen, and we're React Native Radio. As you can tell, I'm all alone today. Who knows where all my other co-hosts are? Jamin's probably riding his tractor, Robin watching Formula One reruns. Who knows? Anyways, I'm all alone. I'm kidding. We have an amazing episode lined up for you, and we have an amazing guest on the show, Jon Samp. Jon Samp is the head of product at Expo. He has built multiple React Native and Expo apps over the years, including one at Code Academy that was featured on Apple's App of the Day, and another that helps people brew specialty coffee that he took to New York's Coffee Con. That's very cool. Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's awesome to be here.
We're glad to have you. I really want to hear about this Coffee Con specialty coffee app that you built.
Are you into specialty coffee?
I don't know if I'd say specialty coffee, but I'm into coffee. Yes. I needed to keep me awake half the time. But yes.
Well, great. We should be friends. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, every year when we have our annual retreat, we do a coffee exchange. It's usually you bring local coffee from where you're at and we exchange it. I usually bring coffee from local roasters here in Durham. And this year, during the exchange, I got coffee from Jamin. He was away in Hawaii, and he got one from a local grower, I believe, out in Hawaii. Haven't given it a try yet. And then Leon, who also works at Infinite Red, he brought some beans from South Korea for me to try too. So,
well, that sounds
a lot of
awesome.
Coffee nerds here. Yeah. Real quick before we get into the episode, what is your favorite bean?
Oh my gosh. Well, in terms of specialty coffee, I really love Onyx Roasters out of Arkansas. And if I had to pick one, pretty normal specialty coffee guy. I really like Ethiopian coffees, natural processed, if you're into that kind of thing. Very fruity, acidic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's usually what we do, kind of our morning ritual over here. Awesome. So before we get into the topic, let's hear from our sponsor. Infinite Red is a premier React Native consultancy located fully remote in the US. We're a team of 30 senior plus level React Native developers and support staff, and have been doing this for nearly a decade. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next project, hit us up at infinite.red/radio. Don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. All right, let's get into the topic. Without giving it away too much, I'm going to name our topic for today, Expo Workflows with Jon Samp. But before I go into a little bit what that is, Jon, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey that led you to Expo and where you're at today.
Yeah, so I've had quite a journey with React Native and also with Expo in the past. Like you mentioned before, I was working at Code Academy and trying to help people learn how to code. And one day we were thinking we should really have an app that allows people to practice the stuff that they learn so that you can, learn it better. Mm-hmm. And the problem was I only know React. And so I was like, well, I can't do that. But then someone introduced me to React Native and I started building an app. And then I heard about Expo shortly thereafter. And it was really fun. I loved working on React Native. It was so cool to be able to make genuine stuff with React Native. And I was like, this is so powerful. As I started working more with it, the app did pretty well and I loved the tools. I ended up reaching out to the Expo team and talking with our CEO, Charlie. He was like, wow, I have your app on my phone actually. And so we started talking more and I ended up joining the company. That's been almost 5 years since then. And so since then I've made a variety of apps. There's a coffee one. I made one for playing the game of Scrabble.
That's awesome.
One thing I don't think is said enough about React Native is you can kind of make apps for fun, like you do websites, which you can't really do as well if you need to do both Kotlin and Swift and stuff like that. So it's just, I find that really enjoyable.
Totally. Yeah. React Native has an edge on all the others right now. And we can go into all that, but I think we're preaching to the choir on this podcast. Anyways. So I think one cool thing about this recording when it comes out, Expo SDK 52, which is technically still in beta, probably will be released shortly before this episode's released. That's come out, and that's a huge release. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is a massive release. Even if you look at the release schedule this year, it's been almost 6 months since we released the last SDK.
Yeah.
The reason for that is because of the new architecture. It is default in SDK 52 and turned on, and it's pretty awesome. It speeds everything up, and we've been trying to make sure that all of the libraries that you use work with SDK 52 and the new architecture. But it's not just that. Like, there's like new Expo video libraries. There's the Expo camera libraries where we've made improvements to SQL and like just so much stuff. I was actually tasked with making the image for SDK 52, and I was like, how do you do this? There's way too much stuff in here for me to like focus on one topic.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot. I think our listeners should go and read the blog article that's probably been out by now for a while. A lot of good stuff in there, and a lot of stuff that I think I'll be leveraging with my client, at any point when it comes out. So let's actually get into the specifics of our topic. Expo Workflows. Can you, without kind of going too deep into it, what is Workflows and why did you all choose to go down the rabbit hole of creating EAS workflows?
Well, yeah, maybe I can talk about like how we got here. And
Yes.
It's really been in a direction we've been going for a while. So we have services that help you take your project and make it into a production build for iOS and Android. We can also submit it for you to the store, and we handle all of the credentials there. And then we can also do stuff like send over-the-air updates. So if there's a bug fix or something, you can get that out to your users quickly. One thing that we've noticed is, especially like with the build product, people will make a build, and the thing that you want to do next is you want to submit it to the store, and people kept on asking for that. And so we ended up kind of hard coding that into the EAS build command. And so now there's EAS build -- auto submit that just, if a build succeeds, it automatically submits it to the store. And this kind of opened up a rabbit hole of people asking us if we could allow them to do about 1 million other things, as you can imagine. I mean, you work with other developers. Everybody has like their own release process. I'm sure you understand this.
Yes.
So this got me really interested in like, what do people want? And how do people want to automate the release process, especially around our tools? And so we talked with 50 people and 50 of our customers at the beginning of this year. And I just started asking them, how do you take features that your developers are building and how do you get them out to your users? And as you can imagine, we got about 50 or even 100 different replies to that. But people would say like, okay, I make a build, then I want to run an end-to-end test with Maestro. And if that succeeds, then I actually want to go and send that to like our CEO to make sure that they understand like what's going to go out to the app stores. And then once they sign off on it, I want to submit it then. And you can imagine there's like just a bunch of different variations of that. And so more and more we started realizing, okay, we need to make something that's a lot more flexible. We need to allow people to do more stuff than just make a build and then submit. That's like one good use case, but now we've identified about 50 others.
Totally. Yeah, that's good. So this is your whole workflow post-development, getting into the stores and kind of automating it and giving you that automation capability kind of with EAS at the end of the day. EAS does an amazing job with the developer experience right now. So I think kind of adding on to that great developer experience kind of takes it to a whole other level. Tell me a little bit more about workflows. Like dig into, it sounds like a CI/CD platform in general. Like what more is it? What does it give the users?
So EAS Workflows is a CI/CD service, but it's built for Expo and React Native apps. It helps you do specific things for getting your native apps out to your users. So other CI/CD services, you can write any code you'd like and it will run on their servers. We are a little more niche and refined than that. So we've got like pre-packaged jobs that you can run, and these help you do build submissions and updates. We also will help you do things like end-to-end tests with Maestro, so you don't have to set up a lot of code to get something like that to work. And just like other CI/CD services, we've got conditionals on every single job, and every single job has prerequisites that you can set. So you can start automating a release process with your team. One of the things that customers told us a lot was like they're using our build product, but they're also using something like GitHub Actions for a bunch of stuff like, I don't know, running TSC, running lint, and running unit tests. And so the way they have it set up is you use GitHub Actions to do all of that stuff, and then you call it to EAS build, and then the GitHub action waits until the build is done, and then they'll do something else with GitHub Actions after. So they ended up having these two CI/CD processes with two different YAML configurations, and it just becomes this mess. And so this will allow people, like, everything that you're doing with your app should be able to be done on EAS itself. So it should reduce the surface area of like configuration that you need to do as a team.
That's awesome. That's cool. So I do like the idea of these like managed jobs that you're talking about. So with the Maestro tests, I do leverage it currently on a client project that I have. It stays within GitHub Actions. Can you tell us a little bit more about these prepackaged jobs or managed jobs?
Yeah, so these prepackaged jobs, I think a really good example is the Maestro test one, which is for end-to-end tests. So we actually have specific workers and servers that are like great for certain types of jobs. So if I make an Android build, we've got these things called C3D machines that are very fast at creating Android builds. We just released those this year, and they're like 40% faster than they used to be, which is kind of wild. With that, though, they lack the ability to spin up an Android emulator. So for the end-to-end test one, we're able to use a different type of machine that it's a little slower for Android builds, but it allows nested virtualization. So allows the ability to have an Android emulator. And then we're able to take the build from the first fast job and then run that on the second slower machine, but it has the ability it needs to actually run the end-to-end test. In addition, as part of these prepackaged jobs, we're able to look at the inputs of them and make decisions for you. So if you hand us an ID of a build that's Android, like we'll just go figure out the correct machine for you. And the exciting part for us is as we get access to better machines, we're able to upgrade those for you without any intervention on your part. So when you use these, you can just expect these to get better over time.
Yeah, and I think for our listeners that aren't familiar with this, I'd recommend you take a look at it, because when my client pretty much said, hey, we want this whole flow of, building Maestro tests, confirm lint, TSC passed, and once it's done, go ahead and push a build out so that it's available, and then push via Slack, actually. I'm even going to go a level deeper. Via Slack, message our Slack instance, say, hey, build is ready, click the link here, and all that. It's great because all you have to do is like EAS/Maestro. I think it was EAS/Slack with your Slack ID, of course, like with some configuration, but with like minimal configuration, I was able to get it done with a very small YAML file. So I like the idea of calling it prepackaged jobs. You guys really take the developer experience and kind of push it to the limits there. And that's great.
I'm glad to hear that you've like found use out of those. We talked a lot about how we should name those and put those together. It's really cool that you're using them.
Yeah, we're using them heavily. And I do think that ability to kind of keep them within GitHub Actions or workflows here in the future is great for smaller clients and specifically startups, right? That can't afford Maestro Cloud, for example, can't afford these larger prepaid enterprise tier services, but GitHub Actions kind of handle the jobs for them. So there's really no, it's a no-brainer for them at that point. So I've said GitHub Actions a lot. Do we need GitHub Actions anymore with workflows?
With workflows, well, it depends what you're trying to get done.
Yeah.
Do you need GitHub Actions? Probably. There's probably things that you do that require a more generalized CI/CD like GitHub Actions. One thing I keep on telling people is you can think of workflows as like this refined specialty tool for a specific purpose. And for that purpose, we want it to work really well. But for instance, workflows can't do everything that GitHub Actions does right now. And I want to be really upfront about that because you shouldn't go into it thinking that it's a drop-in replacement or something. The goal of it is to help you take your app, get it out to your users, and also get it reviewed through your team and to like help your whole team work together. So we've got these prepackaged jobs. You can also run custom code. So it's not just limited to what we have provided for you already. However, we don't have access to like all of the GitHub packages. I think in GitHub you can use like uses and then say like something like at PR comment and have it go comment on your PR. You could absolutely write that manually inside of EAS workflows, but that package, that shortcut doesn't exist at least yet in workflows. So there might be some use cases where you'd want to like pass the baton between them and use them together still.
So you can mix and match between GitHub Actions and ES workflows at the end of the day.
Yeah, certainly.
And you can trigger jobs from each other easily too, right? So you could kind of start off with lint, TSC checks, passes. All right, workflow, go ahead and do all this stuff for me. Come back, actually need to do something else in GitHub Actions. Okay, now let's go ahead and send our builds out, send our Slack messages out and all that kind of stuff. So baton passing does work. So it gives you the ability to kind of leverage both of them.
Yep.
Awesome. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but this will all live on the, I guess it's expo.dev dashboard. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. As you like, one of the things that's going to happen as you use this is you're going to start making builds, updates, submissions. Your whole team will do that. A lot of people are already doing that just with the CLI commands or with GitHub Actions. But as you've got more artifacts, we are going to help you organize all of those for your team. That's really a big thing that we're going to be working on next year, is helping organize all this information to make it really easy to know, like, what is the development build that I should be using as a developer right now? What is on the App Store? And how is all that stuff going? Like, how's it doing? Those are definitely things we want to answer.
Awesome. I now know a little bit about, what ES Workflows is and how it functions. How do I set it up? What's the difference?
So to set up an EAS workflow, it's very similar to GitHub Actions or even Circle CI. All of this happens with YAML. So if you love YAML, you're going to feel right at home. Yeah. Inside of your...
No complaints.
Yet another markup language, right? So
yeah, exactly.
I actually just learned what that meant. I spent my entire development career for the last 8 years having no idea. And I was like, oh.
Markup. Yeah, yet another markup language. Yep.
Anyway, so inside of your project, you will create a directory called .eas/workflows. And then inside of there, you can drop a YAML file. Now, I want this to be the most interesting radio show you've ever listened to. So we're about to talk about YAML.
Yes.
YAML on radio. So inside the YAML file, you can give it a name, you can give it a trigger, like when you push to GitHub or when you open up a PR, and then it's got a key for a list of jobs. And the list of jobs, like I said earlier, can have prerequisites, can have conditionals, and can do all of this stuff like build, submit, update, or do custom code that you write for it to do. Now, to trigger these...
that's part of the prepackaged ones that you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah, those are the prepackaged ones. So you can drop all of those in, and then you can also write custom code as well.
Cool. Okay.
Now, to actually run these, there's going to be two ways to do it. And so one thing that other CI providers, I find it difficult to do, is when you're developing, you have to make the trigger of your workflow true in order to get the workflow to kick off. Like, I've got to push to GitHub. So if I've got something on main, like you'll just see me writing like testing 1, 2, 3 on main, like 15 times as I try to get the YAML correct. I think there are some ways you could probably run these in different ways, but anyway, that's just how I do it.
That's how I did it the other day. So keep going. It was like, try 1, try 2. It'll work this time. Nope. Trying again. Yep. Yes. And
it feels
done.
So public to the rest of your team when you do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one thing we're providing as well is a CLI that will be able to run these. So instead of having to push to main to get this to trigger, you could run EAS workflow :run and then give it your YAML file. And then you can also provide it with inputs like the branch name, because you'd usually have like the main branch name or maybe your PR branch name as an input to the workflow, which might affect some stuff like what update branch or something. And so you can run it from your command line. It's going to push it to our server and run it on our the actual servers it will run on. So it's not running locally, and it will run in the environment that you would expect it to run in production. So that should make it easier to develop these things without having to push a bunch of commits. It also, I don't know about you, I really like releasing stuff manually often.
Yeah.
Automating all that stuff is great depending on the team you're on, but I kind of like having a lot of control. So just being able to say workflow run, release my iOS app whenever I feel it's ready, that's kind of nice.
Yeah. I agree. That's cool. I have a note in here, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you think, and if you can give some background about it. But you mentioned in our prep about fingerprint hashing and checking. How does that exactly work within this workflow pipeline?
Oh, yeah. So that's something that people have been asking us about for ages, and people have been figuring out ways to do it themselves in some ways too, which has been really cool to see. So pretty much, if you're not that familiar with fingerprinting and updates, every single native build that you do has a certain surface level of APIs, and we call this the fingerprint of it. And when you send an update to it, the update has to be compatible with all of those APIs. Otherwise, like the update or like the Metro bundle on top is not going to work. So we've got to make sure that both of those are compatible so that you can push updates out to not only your users, but to send preview updates to your team for stuff like PR reviews, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So one thing that we'll be able to do with workflows is we've got this new thing called fingerprint that we've been testing out, and it takes a fingerprint of every single build that you make and also all of your updates. And while in a workflow, you can take the fingerprint of your current project, and then you can see, are there any builds for this particular fingerprint already made? And if there are, you can publish an update. And so if someone wanted to preview that in like the development client, they could preview it within a minute or something. But if you've added a native dependency or changed something on the native layer, it could kick off a development build, which will take 5 or 10 minutes. And then it could tell them to go download that. So just like removes a lot of decisions you have to make and a lot of understanding of like compatibility layers between the native side and like the Metro update side.
Cool. Yeah, that caching right there, caching out of the box for you. So your builds, you don't have to wait those 30 minutes to get a build ready to validate the PR when all you did was change your PR template, for example. Like it, like it should be smart enough to kind of do that for you. And I think that's also a really cool thing to, I'm just kind of thinking as you were talking, you were saying how it's basically caching, and that's a cool thing where the workflow can potentially decide for you, am I going to do an over-the-air update versus am I going to do a full build and, push to the store for you using the auto flag that you mentioned earlier to kind of get that out there for you. So endless possibilities where you don't have to really think about it. It's essentially set up for you. And that's pretty cool. And all available in the UI. I love that.
Yep.
That's great. This all sounds expensive. And Expo, you all released an article earlier that you were doing something opposite to the market where you were reducing your prices rather than increasing your prices, which I'm sure a lot of the customers appreciated. How does this work pricing wise? Is it free? Does it come with a cost? How does that work?
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier this year, we actually lowered quite a bit of our prices. Mostly, like I personally, and I think all of us really care that we provide services that help people, but don't try to price gouge them. Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're trying to run a business. So yeah, I'm going to recommend the things that we're working on and hope people will buy them. But we're also really cognizant that like people want to self-host stuff. They want to run this stuff locally or do it in their own way without necessarily paying us or hosting it elsewhere. So that's been very important to us too. And so one kind of indication is like, if everyone wants to self-host and not use ours, we should really talk to them about price and be like, maybe our price is too high. Yeah. That's kind of what happened earlier this year. And we thought like, okay, cool. We need to lower this because it's not being useful enough for what we want to affect. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so with Workflows, it is a paid product. The way that we're going to charge for this is when you make builds, just like you do today, they're going to cost whatever builds do now. So most builds are between $1 and $2 if you're using like our medium-sized worker, and it's going to be the exact same thing on Workflows. It's just like running EAS build, except for now you'll run EAS workflow run. It's not getting replaced or anything like that, but the pricing will be the same there. Now, we're also introducing these new custom jobs. And since we're running those on our servers, we would like to make sure we can keep those servers up. And so we'll be pricing that based on CI minutes. Now, one thing that's really interesting to me, and like we almost never get to make this argument, which is like we're never cheaper than other operations or other CI/CDs or other services, because we're often built on top of them and we're trying to provide different values, like making things faster, easier, stuff like that. But with these custom jobs, we're actually going to be very competitive with other CI/CD services. And at least for iOS jobs, we're actually going to be a little bit cheaper than a service like GitHub Actions. And we're also going to provide people with almost twice the cores on the machines. So the jobs are going to get done faster as well. So we're really happy that we've been able to figure out how to do that for those particular jobs. And it's really important to us we can make that kind of job really cheap, because it's one of the core things that developers do on our service. And so we want it to be fast and cheap. And so I don't think it's going to be cheaper than anything you could do just by yourself if you wanted to code all of this. That is really not our overall goal. But hopefully you'll find some value in it. And if you think it's way too expensive or way too cheap for some reason, you should definitely let me know, because we're definitely keeping our ears open on that.
Yeah, that's great. With the different solutions out there, and you kind of mentioned, price-wise, you all are competitive with them, which is great. With all these solutions out there, CI/CD isn't something that came out 2025 this year, 2024. Sorry, I'm already thinking of next year.
It's been a long year.
Yeah, right. I'm ready for 2025. No. CI/CD didn't just come out this year. It's been around for a while. So it's not necessarily you're reinventing the wheel. You're doing it the Expo way. What is the value prop to a listener that is a big Circle CI fan, big, company XYZ fan? What is the value prop for them to pitch ES Workflows to their employer?
So there are two things I think of here. First, EAS workflows are going to be really fast for you to set up. We've already talked about the pre-packaged jobs. Those are a couple of lines, and you can eliminate any calls to if you're running Fastlane or other stuff like that to coordinate your builds if you're not already using us. So it's definitely worth checking out. Now, as you said, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Really, we're trying to add a lot of ability to sequence and allow you to do more with what people are already doing with our current products for building and updating, stuff like that. Where I think it's going to get interesting is stuff we're, going to be working on in 2025, as you sort of accidentally mentioned and let that slip. Yeah. Because we think there could be a lot cooler stuff with CI/CD that I just haven't seen yet. This is stuff like pulling in your team to the CI/CD process. This is done just a little bit with other services where you can get approvals, but we want to take that a lot further. So I don't know if I can talk about what we're thinking about doing next year and what we're working on and where we're going with this.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Let's make sure our listeners don't listen to the whole episode and have to wait till the end for that. For that bit right there. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good to hear. You all are just trying to stay within the CI/CD, I guess you could call it framework, have you? But also at the same time, giving the users the whole Expo workflow, giving them shortcuts to eventually get to the end goal. That's great. Can I use workflows if I'm not a full Expo or EAS framework, right? Can I leverage workflows to help create my builds for me, or do I have to use the EAS build command for that to work?
You could leverage workflows to run any command, but it's going to work best for you if you're using EAS build and you have an Expo app, at least for now. I really don't want to overpromise that you can go and, start building your other apps with this.
Yeah. I mean, you did mention
it's pretty specialized.
Exactly. And you mentioned you could create your own triggers and all, your own custom jobs, write your custom jobs. So it is possible, but it's more efficient, I assume, is probably the better phrasing here if you are an Expo user. Awesome. Before we talk about the future, is there anything about workflows that you feel like we didn't cover that you'd like to kind of talk about?
I think we talked about a lot of it. Yeah, we're really excited about this from early testing. People seem to be having a pretty good time with it. So we're just hoping that it continues to go well. And we're really trying to listen to how are people using this and how can we make it more useful for people. So if that's how you run stuff, how the YAML is structured, we've made a couple of improvements and changes there to other CI/CD services, but it's a lot like the same YAML you would have for GitHub Actions. So it will look familiar to you. Or if people have feedback about the pricing or stuff like that. Yeah, we're always trying to listen and make changes and to iterate on that stuff.
So it's not YAML 2.0 or anything.
It's called JSON.
Yeah, there you go. Even
I'm kidding. People probably be like, oh my God.
Yeah, everyone's signing up. Awesome. Cool. So I guess, give us a sneak peek. What does the future hold for workflows? Right now, we've heard what's coming out today and what's happening. What's coming out in the future?
So going back to that original conversation at the beginning of the episode, talking to all of these customers, probably the most interesting thing that we kept on hearing was after people get done with making builds or doing stuff on servers, they then go and talk to their team and they need to get stuff from their team to move to the next step. And that's something that I just really haven't seen in a CI/CD service. And that's something that we are uniquely positioned to solve or to help people do. And people kept on asking us, like, can you just do this for us? Like, can you just send that Slack message like you were talking about? Or can you like make sure a couple of people approve of this and then we'll move on to the next step of submitting it to the store? And so next year, we're going to be really focused on making this work better for teams. And this means like if you add people to your team on Expo, you can add them into groups like alpha or beta testers. And then inside the workflow, you can say like, okay, notify all my alpha testers that there's like a PR that they need to review. Then since we build the developer tools inside the development clients, all of those testers can open that up and then provide qualitative feedback. They can give thumbs up or thumbs downs, and that will be reported back to the workflows screen. And then once you get to a threshold, you could move on to the next step or not. Or you could maybe message someone that like you got a bunch of thumbs downs or something and you need to go fix something. To me, this is a way to make your team move faster and just so interesting because in my past, when I was working on apps like this, I would make changes. I'd want to get them out to the store. And then I would spend days at my company trying to get people to test it, to QA it, to get my CEO to look at it. And then it would be almost the next week before I could release it. So it didn't even really matter if I could push out an over-the-air update in like a minute or two. I really needed to get those people in the process. So we just kept on asking, why isn't your team part of that process? Like, why is CI/CD just in the cloud? Why is it not helping your team be more effective and to communicate faster and better? So that's the hope. You make a change, it goes out to all of the people that it needs to. You also get all of the logs from the tests as well. And given all of that information, it should be very easy for you to make a decision of, should we go to the App Store with this? Should our users see this? And then hopefully if something goes wrong after that, it's relatively easy to roll back.
Yeah. Wow. I have a lot of questions on this. That is so cool. And I'm actually even just thinking about my current client project where we release a build. Yes, QA will go through it at some point, but before QA takes a look at it, product is notified and also taking a look at it and also preparing for when QA looks over, approves a ticket. Say a ticket is add confetti on the screen when you tap this button. Cool. That's usually my go-to. QA is like, yep, I see confetti. I'm good. It goes to product. Product looks at it and is like, oof, not enough confetti. I guess in this scenario, they can kind of give you that qualitative feedback, right? Not enough confetti is qualitative feedback right there. And they kind of comes back to you and you're able to adjust it accordingly to get that pushed out. That is great because now you are, what's the phrasing here? You're keeping your feedback specific to that build, right? You're not overwhelmed by all the noise of, hold on, was this for build 1 or build 2? Was this for, beta build or, my current production build? That's awesome. Bring in non-developers into the development process. Huge fan of that. And I think that's something that we need to do a lot of.
Yeah. And kind of what you're referring to in the background is something that like really drives me insane, which is having to bookkeep like all these different build IDs, all of these different branches, and getting everybody to know which one they should be looking at. If there was a world we could live in where you just didn't have to organize and bookkeep all that stuff, I think that would be awesome. So that's also part of this too.
Yeah, exactly. It's so much of that whole, you get a Slack message like, hey, you put ticket 1, 2, 3 in testing and I'm testing it and I don't see it. Well, usually my first question is like, what version are you on? It's like, all right, there's a new version out. Thank you. Anyways, I'm starting to go on a rant here. That
sounds like you've got some frustration with some past experiences.
Well, this is going to help a lot. And I think a lot of our listeners, a lot of our clients, the whole idea of the workflow, the idea of getting the code on paper, the code in VS Code or Cursor down to getting it to the App Store can be very complicated and almost like a roller coaster ride. Of course, the smoothest part is when we're developing, right? But once it's out of our hands, that's when things go AWOL. But also, that's where a lot of communication gaps tend to happen. And I think the idea of this workflow and the idea of keeping the qualitative feedback within the build and within the dashboard will help everyone's communication kind of stay in line and stay siloed within it to avoid any gaps that might come out from it all. Does that all sound right to you?
Yeah, that's the dream and that's the hope. That's what we're building. Exactly. So really excited to build more of it. And you'll definitely see more of that coming next year.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think this goes back a lot to, stuff I've said on this episode and a lot of different episodes. At Expo, you all are really putting the developer experience at the top, and you are really exceeding at it and fulfilling it, in my opinion, doing a very good job at it. And even with your beta products, I've used a lot of the beta stuff and loved it. So
thanks.
This is one that I will definitely be using, and I'll definitely be pitching right after the recording. And yeah, I love it.
Yeah, thanks.
Jon, thank you so much for coming on the show. Usually how I like to end off is, where can people find you on socials?
So I'm over on Blue Sky, and so you can find me over there. I'm at
Nice.
jonsamp.dev. That's jonsamp.dev. So yeah, come follow me and come chat. I'll be on there. It's great.
Awesome. Yeah. I think I only follow you on Twitter. I'm still trying to catch up with the whole Blue Sky thing.
You got to come over. It's a React Native app. It's Expo.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, it is. You got me there. Well, let me just put it this way. I got over the weekend, Friday, for our listeners, this is Thursday, but last week, Friday, I set up my account, and then I didn't open it over the weekend. Monday, I come in and I look at it. I'm like, why do I have 50 notifications on here? And I click into the folder, and it was Blue Sky. And I was like, oh, I guess this is where the fun is now. So everyone's over there now. Is it the same handle on Twitter?
Yep. Also on Twitter as well.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah.
And then if you want to talk to me directly, we have the Discord for Expo community developers. And so you can always join that. That's chat.expo.dev. There's thousands of people there, and the Expo team is regularly in there, and we're making announcements. So if you aren't already in there, that's a really good resource to stay on top of everything that's happening, and also to ask questions and to talk with people.
Totally. I can agree to that. I'm in that, and very, high signal. There's a lot of stuff happening over there. Cool. Well, that's it for this episode. Robin usually ends it off with a mom joke, but I will give a dad joke to kind of give this off. So, Jon, why don't vampires like working on software project teams?
Vampires. It's hard to sink your teeth into that one. Why?
That's a very good answer, but no, that's close. Because of all the stakeholders.
Oh, that's good. So, I enjoy that. I really love dad jokes, so...
Awesome. That's credit to the current client project that I'm on. He's probably listening to this. He'll know who he is. So that's awesome. Thank you very much again, Jon, for coming on. And to our listeners, thank you all, and hope to hear from you soon. Bye.
See ya.
As always, thanks to our editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor, Jed Bartosky, our marketing and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Mazen Chami. Our producers and hosts are Jamin Holmgren, Robin Hines, and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/radio. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio on all the major podcasting platforms.